I am now delighted to welcome the grand champion of public broadcasting, the man who chairs our Congressional Public Broadcasting Caucus, who chairs the Library of Congress Caucus here in the Capitol, who has not only represented our interests extraordinarily well here in Washington, but has taken the time to go around the country and visiting stations around the country to see exactly what you're doing and how he can better represent your interest and ours here in Washington. There is just no better friend of public television than the man I'm about to introduce. Ladies and gentlemen, the very Honorable Earl Blumenauer of Oregon.
Thank you. Thank you, Pat. Thanks for the kind words. Thanks for convening again in the Library of Congress. When I'm listening to Dr. Billington, and I do a lot of work with the library, I never tire of hearing him give us a sense of history here. Exuberance, I think, was the term he used 3 times this morning. And when I'm in events here in the Library of Congress, we have a lot of them, I oftentimes look around the room at my colleagues who join us, and I ask myself, could this crew build the Library of Congress today? Remember, the Library of Congress, as we know it, was essentially established in the aftermath of the British burning the Capitol in a dozen volumes or whatever it was. And they started out in 1815 to create a new Library of Congress. They bought Thomas Jefferson's entire library, 6,417 volumes, I think. Largest private collection in the United States, $26,000. Stunning. What waste, you know? What do people who make laws need to know? They need, a Black's Law Dictionary, maybe a thesaurus, an encyclopedia. What do they need a vast inventory like that for? Well, the vision was that if you're going to do it right, you need to be a little exuberant. You need to have a sense of where we are and where we're going. This building itself, imagine the crew today approving this magnificent artwork. $5 million. That was real money in 1897. And I doubt, given the present state of mind, that we could do that. Yet, when we were in the Grand Hall 2 weeks ago for the American Archive Project, and the next night there was a fabulous program with David McCullough about John Adams. There were members of Congress who were just reveling in being in that magnificent space. The same way members of Congress may be a little slow to get behind your efforts, but they wake up in the morning listening to Morning Edition. They watch the evening news on PBS, and they admit to special entertainment moments with their family because of the spectacular work that you do. Well, that's our challenge now, is to connect, as they say in Washington, these dots. And we're in a much better space than we've been of late. Mr. Butler, a wide array of people who've moved forward. I mean, first of all, it looks as though we're not going to threaten the global economy by not paying our debt and raising the interest. Progress. Doesn't look like we're going to have a shutdown this year. Progress. And for the first time in several years, you're not in the crosshairs. Now, admittedly, that's a pretty low bar. Not wrecking the global economy, not shutting down the government, not trying to destroy the institution of public broadcasting. But it's an important start. And we're in this position because, first and foremost, of the work that you have done. And I can't stress this enough. watching what happened when the leaders of public broadcasting, who have day jobs, went a little bit out of their comfort zone to push back. And you started a cascade of events that is still playing out. In addition, the millions of people who rely on your services, in part because of your leadership, themselves were heard. And you've heard stories about the switchboards lighting up and the tens of thousands of emails, the embarrassing editorials for those places that still have newspapers. And it was truly a magnificent outpouring of support. And I think you need to pause for a moment and feel good about this effort. You made it happen. But I think, from my vantage point, the importance is not to pause and reflect and feel a little better that we're maybe got some breathing room. It's what we do with the breathing room. Because I think this is a unique point for us, because there is, in fact, a pause in some of these battles. There is an awareness that has been built, and that was part of the message from you and from your viewers and listeners about the value of public broadcasting. And I think that point was made to a number of my colleagues and the certified smart people who work with them on their staff here on Capitol Hill. And the point for me is, can we build on this moment? And I hope we can. My friend Ken Burns was with you, I guess, at noon yesterday, and I asked Paula, and he didn't. We consulted a little bit before this about what we were going to say and where we're at, and he evidently he didn't use the statistic that I find jaw-dropping, that for just the premiere showings of his 8 special films, there were 380 million viewers. What is the cultural, religious, business institution in this country that has commanded that sort of attention? Certainly none of the monuments here in Washington, D.C. that are actually better funded publicly than public broadcasting. So our challenge, I think, is to look for ways to drive that point home, knowing that it's worth it. And knowing that the small sliver of public funding enables you to do exciting things and leverages all that other money, all that other creative talent. One of the things that I have discussed with Ken is whether we can push back when there are opportunities of public value being transferred. We might claim a little bit of that value. You know, how are we going to establish a permanent endowment for public broadcasting to maybe relieve a little bit of this annual circus and what can happen with the vagaries of the economy and the political trends? You know, there's this great big cable merger out there, right? Tremendous value is going to be transferred and captured, not necessarily by the public. Lots of concerns about this. Is there a deal here at some point to maybe soften the edges of this and make sure that the public is protected, and maybe argue that claiming a little bit to start the endowment? A crazy idea, perhaps, but we need to be alert for opportunities like that, because we've surrendered the airways, and a number of people treat them as their proprietary, their private property, and have long since relinquished the true obligation for public service, which you are providing. Arguably, they owe you. And I'm hopeful in this year that we can think about ways to make that point. I am hopeful that we can build on the platform that you have created, and I'm hopeful that you can continue the momentum. My last word is, I hope that each of you gets a copy of the congressional calendar for the remainder of the year. The leadership puts these things out and talks about when people are here on Capitol Hill and then when they return home. There are smart people that work for you who can get a hold of these. And I would argue that you would task somebody in your organization to look at this calendar and find out how to make sure that every man and woman who serves in the House or the Senate finds a way to visit you on the ground this year. To meet with your board, to meet with your employees, to look at the marvelous things going on in your stations, maybe to look at some of the antiquated equipment, the baling wire and chewing gum that hold things together, but help them get a feel for what it is. Because I know I will never look at you the same, having visited stations around the country, and there's somebody on your team that can talk to everybody that's coming home this next year and try and see if you can have that visit to learn from them and for them to learn from you, which is, after all, what you do on an ongoing basis. You help instruct, inform, motivate, and inspire us, and I hope you can do that a little bit more with some of my colleagues this year. Thank you very much.
Earl Blumenauer. Thank you, sir. Thank you. We're very grateful.